Hello everyone, my name is Connor. Today I'm going to be showing you how I design a mechanical finger in Tinkercad. You're welcome to follow along if you want. This isn't a particularly strict formula, but it's a good way to get introduced to the basic idea. To start this build, I'm going to create a cylinder and put a semi-sphere on top of it to represent one of the lower two knuckles of a pointer finger. I'm doing this to help me get the general shape of what a finger is going to look like later, and the dome is there to help me eventually create a pin. One of the features I'm going to include on this are removing the front and back ends to flatten out the sides of that finger so it looks a little more natural. As I do this, I'm taking care to make sure that everything is symmetrical. I don't want to have one side be more shaved off than the other. I want to be able to create something that looks even and nice as a final project. As I do this, I'm thinking ahead to my pin. I want to be able to have one side that is going to capture the center of the pin and another side that is going to surround that pin so I can slide a bar between it and they can rotate well. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to start by cutting out the center of our domed piece. This will allow for the insertion of the other end of the pin, which will eventually come together to create a fully rotating and movable joint. And that's exactly what I'm making here. I'm attaching the other end of the pin to the bottom of this piece because I want multiple of these pieces to be able to link together to form a multi-jointed finger. Something I'd like to take a second to point out is that I've made my width 6 millimeters for the cutout, and my pin is going to be 5 millimeters across, so I have a millimeter of tolerance, which should be plenty so that the fit is snug but not too tight so where nothing will be able to move. Now I'm quickly making a 5 millimeter hole, which is going to go all the way through the bottom and the top parts of this piece. The way this particular build came out, the hole ended up being a little larger than 5 millimeters across. It was just snapping to a weird spot, but that's okay. As long as it was larger than 5 millimeters and not less, I was all right with that. It just helped my tolerance be a little larger, which would make my fit a little less snug, but still, I'd rather it be less snug than too tight. At this point, I can copy the cutout, move it up, combine all three of these pieces together. I'll have a full complete piece that I can copy again, paste it, and then move it into alignment above the first original piece. Once I take a few seconds to properly align each of these pieces, using their cutout holes as reference for one another, I'll be able to move on to the pin. The pin has a minimum diameter of 3 millimeters. My hole cutout was 5 millimeters, so I'm going to try and make roughly a 4 millimeter pin, which should be strong enough and small enough to work properly. I'm going to make 2 of these eventually, so I'm going to keep one. I'm going to make it green so it's easier to notice, and I'll move it into position to be in line with the other 2 holes. The final piece that I'm missing is the tip of the finger, which is different than the other 2 pieces, but largely the same. So I'm able to copy one of the original knuckles, move it over, and edit that. The way I'm going to edit it is by rounding off the top. First, I'm going to cut it out using one of my removal blocks, and then I can make a domed shape on top of this that matches up with the other cutouts on the front and back of the finger. Once I have this, I can realign it with the very top piece and then attach a second pin. Again, I like to take my time to make sure that everything is properly aligning. I want to make sure that when I print this, my holes will all be in line with one another so that I will actually have a functional finger. In your products, I would recommend taking a few extra seconds to visually line up, make sure everything looks good and centered, and that you have plenty of room for tolerancing with pins. Here, I'm using the same pin twice, so I'm just copying it over and moving it up, and then I will have my finalized jointed finger. Once I've got my geometry set and I know that everything will fit well once it is assembled, I'm ready to print. You'll see here I start deconstructing my assembled finger and laying everything down on the bed as it should be. I am keeping in mind that flat surfaces should be laid flat on the printing bed. I would recommend that holes should be printed vertically, but in this case, I'm electing to go with a horizontal configuration, and that's just because of the size of the printing bed. I don't want to stand these straight up because they might be too tall for the bed. On other projects, I would try to avoid this as much as possible. It just means that the holes might need a little tune-up before assembly. Once you've completed designing your finger, you can either move on from this part of the lab, or you can stick around and you can see how I turn this one finger into a working hand. My strategy for converting a finger to a hand is fairly straightforward. I'm going to start by raising my one finger up fully assembled. and then under it, I'm going to create a section of what is going to be the palm. Once I have this figured out with a pin joint installed at the top of the palm, I will copy all of the segments and repeat it another 3 times to get my 4 fingers. From here, I'll go on to create a thumb, which is a little bit of a different geometry, especially because we have to rotate it a little off axis of the other fingers. From here, I'll let the video play out so you can see my process for developing the rest of the hand. I hope you found this video useful, and I wish you the best of luck in making your own mobile fingers.